Today we're going to do a little bit of time traveling and we're going to head back to the 80s in this tutorial on how to design your very own retro 80s typography in Adobe Illustrator. So follow along and design your very own retro 80s typography with Satori Graphics. What is up, people? Welcome back to Satori Graphics, the home of graphic design content right here on YouTube. So I hope you guys had a great weekend and that you're ready to delve into some typography in the retro kind of 80s style. This tutorial is pretty straightforward to follow and it's a tad long, but follow along with me today and design your very own retro 80s style typography. In today's 80s retro typography tutorial, we're going to want to activate the grid to create precise typography in Illustrator. So head up to View and elect to show the grid. You can press P for the pen tool and then use a stroke with no fill. Your lettering for this part of the typography will be made up of 3 thick lines. So imagine how you're going to make your design using 3 lines per letter. I'm going to show you the letter M here and how it's done. You can use the Alt Option key to duplicate a line and then you can use the grid to evenly space the line apart. So I'm moving this line over 3 squares to the right. You can then press A for the direct selection tool to manipulate it and move the anchor points around. I've turned on the Smart Guide settings, which you can find in the Illustrator preferences in the top left of the screen. And as you can see, Illustrator shows me when my line is perfectly positioned at an intersection. Seeing as the letter M is symmetrical, you can make half of the letter and then duplicate it to save time and to be precise. So use the Alt Option key to duplicate the lines over to the right and then reflect them. Again, the Smart Guides will inform you when the lines are perfectly aligned. You can zoom in with Command or Control plus on your keyboard to check the lines are connected like mine here. And if you need to change the anchor points, you can use the Direct Selection tool. Now you need to select 2 lines that are in pairs, so I'm going to select the 2 top lines here and then press Command or Control J to join them together as one line. You then need to do this 2 more times for the other lines. You should end up with 3 lines in total for your retro 80s typography, and you can now increase the stroke weight up to something quite thick in appearance. So here I have one word for my 80s retro typography, and now we're going to add the gradient effects to it. You can go ahead and hide the grid because we don't need to use it anymore in today's Illustrator tutorial. So when you're 100% happy with the thickness of your lines, outline the stroke to convert the stroke lines into a shape. Bring down a guide from the rulers that is halfway across your typography, and then access the pen tool. We want to make a shape that's going to fit around the top half of the typography with the pen tool. You can now delete the guide and then select everything and press Command or Control C to copy it. Open the Pathfinder window and use the crop option here. This will cut out half of the retro typography. Press Command or Control V to paste the copied section as we want to cut the bottom half out now. With this selection highlighted, press R for the rotate tool and then drag the target icon down to the bottom of the shape like I've done here. Click on the icon just once and then hold down the Alt Option key and click one more time. In the new window, type in 180 degrees and then hit OK. Select everything and then use the crop option again in the Pathfinder window. Now you can bring the 2 shapes together and it doesn't matter if there's a slight gap between them. Still in the Pathfinder window, use the trim option, which is going to allow us to add a gradient to our 80s retro typography in Illustrator. For this bottom section here, you're going to want to create a 3-color gradient from very dark blue to light blue. Change the direction to -90 degrees so the darker side is at the top of the typography. You will need to take the gradient tool and draw a line across the entire typography to spread the gradient evenly throughout the entire design. We're going to do the same for the upper section of our retro typography. So use the trim option in the Pathfinder window and add a gradient. This time we want to create a gradient that's almost white to navy blue. If you guys have enjoyed today's tutorial, drop a like and a comment letting me know. And if you're new here to Satori Graphics, subscribe for weekly graphic design content, which I upload 3 to 4 times a week. So again, use the gradient tool to spread the gradient across the 80s retro typography. Essentially, that's the hardest part of today's tutorial finished. Now select a very dark blue to almost black in colour in the colour palette and access the rectangle tool with M on your keyboard. Make a shape across the entire canvas, send it to the back and then lock it down in place to act as a backdrop for this retro typography design. This next step is optional, but we can add a white stroke around the typography. You might want to play around with the stroke weight, but also in the stroke window, you can change the stroke to be centered, to be inside, or on the outside of your design. For the last part of today's Illustrator retro typography design, I've chosen this font here. You can search for it on Google or places like DaFont or Font Squirrel. I've added a light pink colour to the type, and now we're going to add an inner glow. Add a white colour for the glow with a 100% opacity and the blend mode is overlay. The blur value will be based around the size of your design, so play around with it until you think it looks best for your design. Lastly, we're going to add an outer glow, which is really going to add to the 80s retro effect. I'll use pink for this effect, a normal blend mode, and an 80% opacity. Now all you need to do is to figure out the layout for your retro type. You can also add a little section of typography giving more detail and information, but make sure to use a colour from the design itself for this part. I have one last important step to mention. You will need to select everything on your design, then expand the appearance. This means that when you change the size of your design, the strokes and the effects will scale proportionally. So there was today's tutorial on the retro 80s style typography in Adobe Illustrator. Let me know what you guys thought of today's video in the comment section below and drop a like if you did enjoy it. Also, share my content on social media if you do find it useful. I'm going to be right back tomorrow with more graphic design content as well as 2 other videos on Thursday and Friday. So until then, design your future today. Peace.